folks will watch it after. I have a Patreon community of shy nerds who are all queer, who will be
Shiners?
shy nerds.
Oh, shiners. I was like, shiners? Shriners?
Just who are afraid to leave their house.
They're welcome to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael. Turn that off so we're not talking to ourselves. Okay. So welcome everyone to Queer Love and Pain, an evening with Jendi Reiter and Ella Dawson, two novelists. We're happy to have them, well, happy to have Jendi back and happy to welcome Ella for the first time. Please give them a nice hearty welcome. On camera. My name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder, along with my partner Donnie Jokum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the space you're in right now. We're also being helped out by Bella Florence, our volunteer. And yes, the Bureau is an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore that Donnie and I founded in 2012, and we've been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. So we have regular bookstore hours, Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. And if you're not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, or for those of you joining online, you can go to our website, bgsqd.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter, which you'll get every other Monday. And it's all about our upcoming events, of which we have many. So as an all-volunteer organization, we are reliant on sales and donations to keep this boat afloat. So I'm going to pass around a bag, and especially if you're not planning on buying books, we ask you to make a donation if you're able to. If you're buying books, you're already supporting us, and we welcome them. You can also use the Venmo QR code, or for those of you online, thanks, Michael. You can go to Venmo and find us at BGSQD. So before I introduce Ella, who's going to read first, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement and a call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to recognize that today, September 28th, is the 358th day of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, funded by our tax dollars and enabled by our government's unwavering support. We hope that you will join us in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, the release of all detainees held by Israel, the release of all hostages held by Hamas, an end to the siege of Gaza, and an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, in order to stop the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of desperately needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Our greater hope is for peace, justice, and liberation from oppression for all people everywhere. So Ella Dawson is an NYC-based sex and culture critic and author of But How Are You Really? A novel about college reunions and queer millennial angst. She was once internet famous for having herpes. Look forward to hearing more, but that's a whole other story. Ella is proudly bisexual, anxious, and aspires to adopt a kitten. Follow her on social media as at Bros and Pros. Please give a warm welcome to Ella Dawson.
Hi.
Hey.
Yes, I am at Bros and Prose because when I came up with my username many years ago, I wrote a lot of prose about bros, which is also how I got herpes. So that was shout out to Wesleyan University, my alma mater, which also partially inspired the book. Just a little bit of context before I read. My book, But How Are You Really, it's technically not a romance novel, but it is a romance novel. It is about a group of queer millennials who go back to their college reunion, their 5-year college reunion, and are dealing with the, oh my God, adulthood. Did this work out the way I expected? Are people more successful than I am? Who am I? Would I be proud of who I've become? And my main character, Charlotte, is an abuse survivor. She's an executive assistant in a terrible job, etc. And in the scene that I'm going to read a part of, she is having dinner with her queer chosen family from college. Charlotte had not purchased a ticket to the class of 2013 reunion banquet because she kept a close eye on her budget. Jackie chose not to attend due to a myriad of disappointing ways Hine University's administration would spend her money. The school does not need another lacrosse field, Jackie pouted as she fished out her credit card at the dining hall. Instead of attending the banquet, they convinced most of the members of the dead, divorced, and otherwise disappointing parents' unofficial peer support group to join them at the undergraduate cafeteria, Caldwell Hall. This was a masterful change of plans, in Charlotte's opinion. She made her favorite sandwich at the buffet, a BLT on rye grilled almost to a burn in a panini press. Then she loaded up her plate with fresh-baked potato chips and resolved to come back for an ice cream with Oreo crumbs. The all-you-can-eat plate was $10 for non-students, and she intended to get her money's worth. There might be Tupperware containers in Jackie's tote bag to smuggle leftovers back to the dorm. Charlotte was not at liberty to confirm this rumor. The 3D support group took over a long table at the back of the dining hall. Charlotte dropped off her plate before doubling back for napkins and a soda. The cafeteria still used the same mud-brown plastic cups designed not to break no matter how hard they were dropped or thrown by students. Strong nostalgia vibes. She caught Jackie stealing one of her chips when she returned to the table. I saw that. I got these to share, her best friend bartered, pushing forward a plate of fries. Is Reese joining us? Nina asked as she stirred her spaghetti. Another rule of the 3Ds group. If they were meeting over a meal, only comfort food was allowed. No kombucha or kale, period. Jackie squirted an appalling amount of mustard onto her hamburger. Nah, he's hosting the class dinner. He said he'd come through for dessert. Amy, Gio, and Matt filled out the rest of the table, laden with plates of pizza. The 6 of them fell into an old pattern. Amy sat on Charlotte's other side, Nina across from Amy, Matt settled in by Nina, flanked by Gio, who's in a prime position to eat Jackie's fries. The 3Ds dated back to freshman year. The support group was born on the living room floor at Acronym House after a disco, when Matt, Charlotte, Nina, and Gio traded messy coming out stories. It felt so good to talk shit and commiserate that the foursome ended up most of their nights together, even after Nina and Charlotte broke up. As a teenager, Charlotte dreamed of conversations like this, honest and relatable and camp as hell. A strange sense of humor bloomed inside of her as she basked in the safety of people who understood her. Charlotte still listened more than she spoke, emotionally repressed and armed with a limited vocabulary for her feelings. But it helped just to learn that no family was a Norman Rockwell painting, no matter how perfect and peaceful it appeared on the surface. That was doubly true for queer millennials whose boomer parents fell on a spectrum from tactless to cruel. Charlotte could hear her anger at her mother's homophobia in Matt's unsteady voice. She recognized her insecurity from her father's neglect in Gio's defensive humor. When Jackie's dad relapsed at the end of freshman year, Charlotte invited her into the fold. Then in the fall, Nina brought her roommate Amy along after her mother passed away. The group's purview expanded to include Amy's grief and eventually Reese's. Jackie formalized the loose bitching circle into a real group after doing a psych project on peer support therapy. The rules were simple. Don't be embarrassed and don't be a dick. For the most part, that was all they needed. Others joined over time as word spread, but there were rarely more than 6 people at a meeting. They were a self-selecting bunch, most of them LGBTQIA+ and inclined to share their feelings. The dead, divorced, and otherwise disappointing parent support group taught Charlotte many lessons. First, it was not okay for her father to skip town when it became clear that baby Charlotte would not save her parents' marriage. Second, Charlotte was not a show dog for her mother to groom and correct and compare with other daughters in her country club. Third, abuse took many forms, from violence to control to neglect. The support group was the closest thing Charlotte knew to acceptance. Her friends helped her see that there was nothing weak about her grief, her resentment, or her fear. When she started dating Ben junior year, she hoped he would join the 3Ds too. On the night they met, they stayed up until sunrise, talking about their conservative families and stifling hometowns. Charlotte had expected Ben to be an aloof player, but Ben asked insightful questions about her childhood in Maryland and listened intently to her answers. He understood the Thorne family dynamics with intuitive grace, and he didn't need her to explain why she did everything she could to avoid going home between semesters. He kissed her bare shoulder and called her strong, and she felt that word all over her body. Anytime she worried she had shared too much, Ben offered a parallel confession of his own. His parents were still together, but he wished they would separate for his mother's sake. Ben inspected a paint stain on Charlotte's palm as he mentioned his father's temper. She curled her fingers around his thumb, hurting for this boy and the weight he carried alone. When she joked that she actually wouldn't hook up with someone affiliated with the university most of the time, hoping to lighten the mood, Ben explained he only joined Sigma Delt because his father was a brother during his days at Hine University. Even when I do whatever they tell me to do, it's still not enough, he said around 4 a.m, his head in her lap and his eyes glassy. Charlotte marveled at the delicate, almost magical intimacy of this conversation. She was grateful for his trust, even as she wondered how she had earned it so quickly. Ben laughed like he couldn't believe his own words. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be dumping all of this on you. I know we just met, but I feel like I can be myself with you. I know what you mean, Charlotte said, as she fell into something that seemed like love. Her hopes were dashed during his first and only visit to Acronym House. With Jackie away on study abroad, the responsibility of vetting Charlotte's new beau fell to Nina. The new couple ate dim sum with her and Eliza in the backyard, and Charlotte tried not to squirm as Nina asked Ben polite but pointed questions about his politics, leftist, his ambitions, congressman, and his intentions. I'm done with hookup culture. Aren't you, Charlotte? I think I found what I've been missing all along. Ben turned in a brilliant performance until the 3D support group came up in conversation. Eliza jokingly warned him that he should expect his girlfriend to bring their relationship issues to the group. Nina swatted her on the arm and laughed. I'm sorry that I wanted their help addressing my attachment issues. Charlotte grinned at the girls, but Ben didn't find the joke funny. I was raised not to air my dirty laundry, he drawled as he stood up and collected their empty paper plates. Nina frowned at his retreating figure, waiting until he was inside the house to raise her eyebrows. What was that about? I think he's nervous, Charlotte said. Meeting the friends is intimidating, and you're not just a friend, you're my ex-girlfriend. She didn't admit it to Nina, but the weird comment didn't sit well with her either. Back in his room at Sigma Delt, she asked him why he'd been so dismissive. I just don't understand what you need a support group for when you have me, he said, as he stroked his fingers up and down her arm, making her wiggle with arousal and confusion. Besides, your mom likes me, or she likes that I'm a boy, problem solved. He gave her a Cheshire Cat grin, his fingernails snagging the delicate skin at her wrist. And so Charlotte stopped going to meetings. Not immediately, but soon. There was always something Ben wanted her to do instead. Go with him to a lax game, help him revise a political theory essay, stay in bed just a little longer. Come on, gorgeous, please. Before she knew it, she rarely spent time with her friends. It was just the two of them in a claustrophobic loop. Charlotte circled from class to the dining hall to Ben's room at the frat house. She lost the group's valuable outside perspective, which in retrospect was exactly what he wanted. Thankfully, Jackie could not be shaken off that easily. When her best friend returned from study abroad, Charlotte moved her belongings from her abandoned room at Acronym to the apartment she and Jackie shared until they graduated. It took 5 minutes for Jackie to figure out there was a problem. Who are you, and what have you done with Charlotte Thorne? She demanded upon seeing Charlotte's closet stocked with gifted designer threads from Ben's family. Is that J. Crew? Have you been fucking brainwashed? Their friendship nearly hadn't survived the following months. Jackie thought Ben was a phony legacy kid masquerading as an activist, and he thought she was an obnoxious hipster feminist. They were not subtle about their mutual loathing. Charlotte struggled to keep the two most important people in her life away from each other, wishing they would grow up for her sake. Jackie cooled it on the criticism when Charlotte asked her to stop, but Ben made no such effort. She's such a snob, he said, wrinkling his nose. She thinks she's better than me because I'm in a frat, which is so unfair. To avoid an argument, Charlotte spent more time with Ben than with Jackie, but still less time than he thought he deserved. When the girls did hang out, he blew up her phone with text messages and questions about when she would be done. I know you love him, Jackie said diplomatically. I know he's charming, but this isn't the kind of relationship that I imagined for you. Charlotte didn't have a comeback for that. Wasn't what she imagined either. The situation got worse before it got better, but Jackie never wavered. She always seemed to be waiting in the apartment when Charlotte came home, and she dropped everything to help when Charlotte was ready to ask for it. When the end finally came, Jackie stocked the fridge with ice cream and a box of PPR cans. She even had the grace not to say, "I told you so." When Charlotte returned to the peer support group at the beginning of senior year, she found she had even less to contribute to conversation than she did before. She didn't know how to be vulnerable when she had so much more to hide now. Her love for Ben went in its own little storage cubby, firmly bolted shut. With such a large emotional wound suppurating in her mind, she couldn't process much of anything. Not her mother's frosty disappointment that she had left Ben, not her confusing feelings for Reese, and certainly not the voice in her head telling her that she was a humiliating, pathetic disaster. Jackie gave her a feelings chart for Christmas that year. Charlotte turned red enough to match the designated shade for anger, but the communication aid did help. "I feel embarrassed," she said, when Jackie reminded her about a 3Ds meeting that afternoon. "Good job," Jackie said, "and I don't care. You're coming with me to the meeting." "Your name is Charlotte Thorne," she told her before they entered the dining hall, or acronym, or whatever venue they'd reserved for the hour. "You are my best friend, and you are safe here." Then she kept her arm securely curled around Charlotte's shoulders, just in case she lost her nerve. Jackie squeezed her knee under the table. "You okay, Char? Still with us?" Today, all this time later, Charlotte fought off the unexpected echoes of Ben's manipulation. For years, she had kept her memories of that traumatic relationship neatly tucked away, but coming back to campus had knocked them loose. Grief lingered like mold in a dormitory bathroom, forever fresh. "Yeah, just thinking," she said. Jackie's concern was evident in her pinched brown eyes. "I'm glad I'm here." She hoped those simple words would communicate everything she wanted them to. Judging by the mushy look on Jackie's face, they did. "Me too, Char. Eat your sandwich."
Thank you, Ellen. Jendi Reiter is the author of 5 poetry books and chapbooks, most recently Made Man, Little Red Tree 2022. The story collection, An Incomplete List of My Wishes, Sunshot Press, New Millennium Writings in 2018, and the novels Origin Story, Saddle Road Press 2024, and Two Natures, Saddle Road Press 2016. Origin Story was a finalist for the Big Moose Prize from Black Lawrence Press, and Two Natures won the Rainbow Award for Best Gay Contemporary Fiction. They are the editor of the writing resource site, winningwriters.com. As always, we love when Jendi comes to the Bureau, so welcome, please, round of applause. Jendi Reiter.
Thank you so much. I love being here. Is this a good microphone? Okay. So just a moment of summary of this. Thank you all for coming, by the way. And there's cookies in the back. So, anyway, Origin Story is my second novel, like you said, and it's a standalone sequel to Two Natures. So it has the same characters if you've read Two Natures. It picks up a few months later, but you can definitely get the gist of it if you haven't read Two Natures. And so it's set in 1996, and it's about Peter, who is a young man in his 20s in New York, and he's trying to figure out why his relationship with Julian, the hero of Two Natures, is not working out the way he wanted it to, because Julian's like this perfect boyfriend, but Peter has a lot of attachment issues, and he's kind of like Charlotte in a lot of ways, and some of the similar reasons. So this section I'm going to read is towards the beginning of the book, and Julian is a fashion photographer, and he's photographing a former supermodel turned influencer at a wellness center. Getting the microphone and chair coordinator. I picked an oak leaf out of Julian's hair, a papery brown curl stuck in his sun-tinted auburn ones. Star-shaped maple leaves pasted a red and yellow collage over the slow-moving stream on the grounds of Spiral Gardens, a wellness institute in the Hudson River Valley. We'd scored a day at the spa because Julian was photographing a celebrity profile piece for InStyle about a former supermodel friend of his who'd reinvented herself as a spiritual fitness life coach or something like that. Just call her whatever she says she is. It doesn't have to be logical, was my boyfriend's experience advice, as we sat on the hillside and watched the leaf patterns ripple and shift. The buzzwords change, but people always want the same things: to stop worrying, feel prettier, and believe they get a second chance. He snapped more photos of the peaceful bronze landscape, though he told me the magazine would try to get by with stock images of October foliage so they could pay him less. Well, we got one. I lightly nuzzled the hair above his ear. He picked up my hand and kissed it. It sort of made my chest hurt. Having something makes you remember not having it. I'm so glad you let yourself take this weekend off, finally, he sighed. Have you talked to Barbara? That's Peter's mom he works for at a transitional home for youth. Have you talked to Barbara? Is everything under control with Tyler and keto? I was grateful he understood that I couldn't go AWOL from my teen clients even for a day. Simmering feuds and sudden blowups between the 7 current residents of Gateway House were a regular consequence of love-starved kids claiming their territory and our attention. Q is a runty, doe-eyed Puerto Rican who'd been pimped to men, and so was freaked out by the gay guys in the house, which would be me and I guess Tyler. Mom and I disagreed how to label him. But the little dude felt compelled to pick fights with us instead of leaving his bogeyman alone. Yeah, thank God, Mom's a miracle worker. Q's only been there a week, and she just found a single lesbian foster mom to offer him a shot at penis-free living. Wish I could break through to Ty, though. I think his art is the key, but he won't let us see it yet. A sweet-toned gong echoed through the crisp air, calling us to the big house for the guided meditation ceremony. The presentations and trade show would be in there. A low-slung, streamlined white modern building with spa and gym facilities, and no doubt a cafeteria that smelled like freshly pulped vegetables. I gave Julian a last kiss. Ready for your green juice cleanse and astral body projection, I teased. He wrinkled his perfectly straight nose. Don't get your hopes up or any other body part. Cheryl's publicist said this expo was Christian flavored. You okay with that? Sure, he didn't look at me. If it keeps Cheryl Kingston's nose clean, who am I to judge? We sat on soft foam plastic chairs and breathed in the sounds of pre-recorded monks chanting. We pushed our seats back and stretched to the unseen sun. We felt our higher power inside our chests like a tiny golden flame. Silence and clean air felt good. Not being the one to hold the space felt even better. No teaching for me today. If anyone got shanked with a sharpened eyebrow pencil, I could look the other way. Julian had quickly introduced me to Cheryl before this medicine show got started. The tall, slim blonde with the gentle smile was not pretentious in the way I expected professional Christians and good-looking people to be. She reminded me of Farrah Fawcett, if more burning bed than Charlie's Angels. The book and course series she was launching today was called Fit for a King, and it was about leading a clean and healthy life through meditation on Bible verses, a simple Mediterranean diet, repetitive exercises, and, quote, mindfully decorating the temple of your body. Her presentation was relaxed and sincere, a plain voice for a colorful personal testimony. From Mademoiselle cover model to coke-sniffing centerfold to a 6-month stint in minimum security for possession, where she found Jesus in a 12-step group run by a priest doing time for a DUI homicide. It didn't make me want to accept the gospel or get my eyebrows plucked, but I respected her optimism as one idealist to another. The exact method wasn't as important as passing on the hope that people in the shit could crawl to higher. After her spiel, people dispersed to their small group workshops or the juice bar. I eavesdropped on Cheryl's interview with the InStyle reporter. Julian was happily absorbed with his camera, his worries for his old friend set aside. The girl from the magazine was playing devil's advocate, pointing out that it was unusual to include makeup and skincare tips in a religious self-improvement plan. God is simple because he wants even people like me to understand him, Cheryl countered. He came so that we would have life abundantly, and our life is in our bodies. We're a part of his beautiful creation. I was curious how Julian took that. as he was more conflicted about the God stuff than he cared to admit. Underneath his flippant one-liners was a buried insecurity that he wasn't living up to the example of his pruny missionary sister in Uganda. But I didn't want to distract him at work, so I snuck in late to the Mission X-Force weightlifting class. Pumping away my troubles was another treat I didn't have enough time for since the gateway house job started. The bulging and grunting in that class would have put the muscle queens at my Ironman gym to shame. Here, though, I didn't feel caught in the crossfire of cruising glances. The trainer was a bull-necked young guy with earnest blue eyes and shaggy blonde hair, like He-Man from the Saturday morning cartoons. Because it was safe and totally inappropriate, I found myself getting turned on by the fog of man's sweat that thickened in the room. Julian was the one who excelled at hookups. When I tried, I felt like those guys were fucking their way right through me, passing like solid flesh through a ghost. My focus shot, I ducked out when the trainer began his sales pitch. In the back garden, I wandered toward the outdoor Tai Chi group to establish cover for status, as they say in the spy novels, then staked out the far side of the building to light up the joint I'd smuggled in my coat pocket. I breathed out sweet clouds. The leaves lost their edges and became a dancing veil, a gypsy's fringe of coins. I would miss Keto. He had a line of some strong shit. Too soon, Julian came looking for me. He didn't smoke, so I didn't offer. You stressed? He asked, sniffing the air. Give me a break, I groused, though his tone was mild. I can't do this around kids. You don't light up every night in that mausoleum you live in? A bag of Doritos, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and thou. If thou came over more often, thou would find out. I poked his rear for emphasis. I had no problem sleeping at Julian's place sometimes, but I wished he was doing more to help me bring Grandpa Saul's apartment back into the land of the living. Did he resent me for taking Mom's off-her shelter instead of his? Seriously, that place makes me feel like I wandered into a Scooby-Doo cartoon. Isn't the whole point of Scooby-Doo that ghosts aren't real? Julian suddenly pulled me around the corner. Quick, let's get out of here. You want to skip dinner and find a place to fuck? My mind, or something, was still in the weight room with the masters of the universe. No, shut up. Julian shook his head, embarrassed by his rudeness. Sorry, it's just another voice broke in. Hey, it is you. I was hoping. Julian Selkirk? Do you remember me? We were face to face with the big blonde from Mission X-Force. Jewel did his best to give the guy a cold stare. I saw his body tense. It made me edgy too, not knowing how to protect him without making a scene. And from what? It's Brent Harrison from Marietta High, the guy pushed on. Yeah, I know. Brent rocked on his feet, wanting to move closer, but stopped by the force field of Julian's unfriendliness. Look, I've always wanted to say, he flicked a glance at me, wondering if I belonged in the audience for his true confession. This is my boyfriend, Peter. Okay, cool, Brent said quickly, his enthusiasm pitched too high. You're still like that. I mean, his face colored. That you're nothing like me? I think you and your friends made that clear a long time ago. Now leave us alone, we're working. No, that's not true. I wanted to tell you I was sorry for so long. I chickened out that night because I was ashamed of what we used to do together, that I wanted it too. I struggle with the same things you do. Darling, I don't struggle. I've completely surrendered to Julian Parry, giving me a wolfish look. I tried to reciprocate, though I hated parading our private feelings to score a point. Brent forced a smile. I bet he was killing it in my Mission X-Force class just now. Any chance you want to go on tour as a bodybuilder, Peter? Jewel didn't let me respond. That's what you're doing now? Tossing pianos in the air for Jesus? I thought you'd be a lawyer in your daddy's firm. The big guy bowed his head. Wasn't for me. I kind of hit a rough patch a couple of years ago. Went into the hospital. Anyhow, working out always helped me channel my feelings, you know? And when the Mission X-Force guys came back to do a show at Roswell Baptist, I felt inspired to join up. You remember how awesome those stunts were when they came to our school? Yeah, I do. It was a big homo circus, Julian turned to me. These ex-football stars and wrestling champs would do a strongman act in our gym. Then when we were all excited, they invited us to a show at my church where we got free hot dogs and the hard sell to come to Jesus. Welcome to separation of church and state, Georgia style. Brent's sad expression deepened. You really don't have any good memories from back then, do you? I remember your dick tasted pretty good on prom night. Did you enjoy that? Or was it more fun watching your wrestling buddies break my ribs in the parking lot afterward? Please forgive me. I hated myself so much, Brent said. And you don't now? Some compassion crept into my boyfriend's voice. I relaxed a little. Jules' rare flashes of anger could be intense, but never lasted long. He liked to say he was content with his low expectations of humanity. Brent's eyes shifted. I found a way to make peace with my temptations without hurting other people. The warmth vanished from Julian's face. Same shit, different day. Tell it to the next kid who thinks he deserves to bleed out for being a faggot. I'm not a Christian anymore. I don't have to turn my cheeks for you. He yanked me away. I followed Jewel to our rental car in the lot. Drive, he said, tossing me the keys. What about Cheryl? We planned to hang around through dinner so he could schmooze with her and maybe line up more jobs. Fuck it, I'll call her tomorrow. Stomach growling and bladder bursting, I took us down the highway, while Jewel pressed his face to the window, streaking it with mostly silent tears. I let cruise control help me out so I could lay one hand on his arm. He locked his fingers through mine, digging into my palm. He was fit, but no bruiser, with an artist's graceful hands, not a boxer's. Had he flung them up that night to protect those dark eyes, that face that was pure gold for the treasure hunters in Chelsea's back rooms? Or had he cradled them beneath him to preserve his fingers' agility with a camera, his ticket out? I gripped harder, aching to transfer pain from him to me, to feel it flow through and out like a lightning rod into the wet, empty night. Babe, you want to talk about? What's there to say? He didn't even try to turn the hitch in his voice into a laugh, but he thumped my hand gently on his leg to assure me I wasn't the target of his anger. This almost made me join him in breaking out the Kleenex. He was so damn polite, not just in the Southern way of fuck buddy Brent, consigning you to hell with a handshake, but truly kind. I wish I'd cruised that Mission X fucker in his weightlifting class. You know he wanted it. I wish I'd taken him out back and bit his nuts off, I said. Now Julian did laugh. He scooted over to lean his head against my shoulder. And I wish you could build a time machine and go back to 1989 and be my prom date. Would they actually let us do that? My Brooklyn private high school had been too countercultural to hold a prom, but they minded their own business about who paired off with whom. Are you shitting me? After he got expelled, Daddy would have shot you and packed me off to one of those therapy camps where they give you electroshock while running a slideshow of the Calvin Klein catalog. I shuddered. It sounds like a Clockwork Orange. He made a sour face. That's what you would think, that the worst part is that horror movie bullshit that makes the news up north when you need Christians to laugh at. But it's not. The worst is when you think you've found a little corner of your life where you can be real with somebody, and bam, he smacked the dashboard. You're just roadkill on the highway to heaven. Spotting the golden arches, I steered toward the off-ramp. Let's stop for a bit. No, I'm okay. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Yeah, but I smoked a blunt and I need some carbs, stat. I pulled a grin. I'm everything they warned you about in Okie from Muskogee. True to his word, Julian kept us on lighter topics, like his profile of Cheryl, while we refueled and finished our drive home. I kissed him on the head before I went up to the counter for our shakes and fries, and held his hand as we ate under the grease-hazed fluorescent glare. They didn't pay well enough at Mickey D's to fight the culture wars. As long as you didn't deal drugs or take a dump on the floor, the staff left you alone. Jules surprised me by offering to spend the night at my place. It was a nice gesture because I had an early morning group session at Gateway next day. Half a dozen jittery or sullen teens learning to listen to each other's feelings, rehearsing for peaceful coexistence with the families we hope to place them in. Despite wanting only to hate him, I remembered Brent dropping a mention of his hospital stay. What if he'd found a place like Gateway instead of the closet case Bible counseling he probably got? Well, maybe then he'd be Julian's boyfriend instead of mine. My concern for gay liberation didn't extend that far. My room had once been Grandma Reyna's, where she knitted and watched TV on the daybed, and after her passing, a guest room gradually taken over by boxes of yellowing paperbacks, seldom used clothes, and tchotchkes whose sentimental value was lost to memory. My first project on move-in had been to turn my new den into a replica of the one I'd left. Goodbye fluffy area rugs and pressed tin pictures of Florida sailboats. Hello Batman and Robin poster, Chris O'Donnell's nipples. Laptop and queen-size bed with navy blue sheets. I could promise Julian that nothing and no one would intrude between us in that bed tonight. And if you want to read a steamy sex scene right after this, you're going to have to buy it. now have a little Q&A with each other and from the audience, and then we'll have more cookies and buy books and enjoy our lives.
Yay. I was so excited when you invited me to do this event with you because I feel like our books have so much in common and themes that our characters are grappling with and exploring. And yet we're both really funny, clever people. So while the subject matter can be kind of dark, like I was just glued to your book. And I want to be very spoiler conscious as well, especially of your book. But we do tackle some tough themes of growing up queer and parental neglect and abandonment and child sexual abuse and all of the things. So that's what's on my mind.
Yes, I was trying to figure out how to do this and look at you at the same time. How do I get this out of here? Pull it up. Okay. Pull it up. Here it is. Out. Well, I was struck by that as well, that although we're a slightly different generation, that some of the stuff in your book really could have been about my family as well. And the kind of broad spectrum of abuse that can be not physical and not obvious, but that can be intersecting with the oppression of queer people and the policing of your identity by people closest to you. It's sadly that hasn't changed that much, but something that really struck me about your story was that the young people in this college setting are so articulate about trauma and about relationships and emotional skills. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't hanging out with the best people in college, but I certainly don't remember in the 90s having that vocabulary. I think it would have really helped so much. Do you feel like that's changed and is changing?
I mean, partially because my book is a romance, there's a lot of fantasy in it. And some of that fantasy is, wow, I wish I had this group of friends who have all of this language and can help me contextualize all of my feelings. Like that is definitely, I don't know that everyone is that lucky. I was certainly not that lucky in college. But I think that watching, it's funny, I now feel like I'm looking at kids today because I'm 10 years out of college and they have so much language and they're sharing it through TikTok. And in some ways, I think that can be a little dangerous when it comes to self-diagnosis or flattening the value of words. But it's really wild opening your phone and having like a 19-year-old talk to you about attachment style and abandonment issues. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So
evolution is proceeding, human race.
It's
Fast,
pretty,
faster.
it's pretty terrifying, pretty wild, but yeah, Gen Z is pretty amazing. But I do think that it's really helpful to look at the historical context of our community and the way that all of these shared traumas continue on, and the way I hope that the Gen Z kids can connect, that we can do a better job of generations connecting with each other and handing down learnings and support. It's one of the reasons I'm really excited to be here in a space like this. But yeah, I wish I were that eloquent. I wish all kids were that eloquent.
I certainly do too. And they also drink a lot. The kids in your, I shouldn't say kids, that makes me sound even older than I really am, which is pretty old. But the young adults, the young adults in your book, except for Reese, right? Because he's sober. The Reese is the boyfriend, the love interest,
non-problematic
he's
one.
a real cinnamon roll. He's an amazing guy. So he's sober, right? He's sober. But how do these folks manage to be that like conscious, I guess, also being that plastered? Because I'm such a lightweight. I am such a lightweight. You give me one glass of sherry, which was what I was doing in college. Was I was drinking sherry with like the pretentious artsy people and pretending I'm Oscar Wilde, or like if Oscar Wilde been a girl, but so like how do they manage to stay that mindful when they're all just drunk out of their mind?
Yeah, I mean,
Where's that the fantasy part too?
there's a little bit of fantasy in there for sure. Our version of that was Pabst Blue Ribbon was very hipster and cool in the 2010s. But yeah, no, when I went to my 5-year college reunion, which was how I initially got the idea for the book, I got extremely wasted. And I've never been a big drinker. I have a low tolerance, and it kind of shocked me to realize, like, oh my God, as soon as I came back to this place of campus, my instinct was to figure out who had the keg. And it was interesting going back to my 10-year. I'm more, I don't want to say like I'm sober, but I just kind of stopped drinking during the pandemic the way that a lot of people did. And it was eye-opening to go back and realize, oh, I don't think I've ever been sober on a Friday night in this backyard where all the seniors live. And so I was very conscious when working on the book of when are they drinking and when are they not, and like when is it preventing them from having conversations and when is it not. And I loved writing Reese, who wasn't in the excerpt, but he is a former bro who is getting his shit together and is now 5 years sober. And he winds up hanging out with Charlotte a lot because all of his bros want to get hammered. And he's like, I'm gonna go hang out with the queer kids instead and go to the discos. But yeah, there's no judgment in using substances, but it was an interesting question of how do you write a campus novel that isn't just everybody's plastered.
Yes. Well, we all dissociate our way through college in our own way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
I wrote a couple of things I wanted to ask you about.
I know. I like
Yeah,
how
about things too.
I have so many thoughts about your book.
Yeah,
I will ask
give me
you a
thoughts.
question
Yeah,
since you
give me
just asked me. I think one of the things we both explore is queer chosen family is a bit of like a trope and a cliche in the way that some people are approaching books right now, but it is important for a reason. And one of the things that really appealed to me about your book is the way that Peter is kind of learning what is family, who is safe, how do we define who we can be vulnerable with, particularly when you're dealing with mental health crises or PTSD or unpacking trauma. And I was wondering how you approached that, especially when it comes to Peter falling in love and opening up to Julian.
Well, Peter and Julian kind of have a life of their own. And I didn't set out necessarily to make Peter a trauma survivor, but when I was writing Two Natures, I was having a lot of trouble getting Julian and Peter to like have a good relationship, even though I knew they loved each other. And turned out like Peter had a lot of qualities that I was also discovering in myself of being somebody who's, been abused in a certain way that maybe wasn't obvious. Or that they didn't understand or didn't process at the time. And he was being love avoidant in ways that I was also kind of unconsciously working through being love avoidant. And, talking to with friends, talking to therapy, therapy, yay, figuring out what his deal was, figuring out what my deal was, sort of happened at the same time. And so I really wanted them to be together. Like that was the guiding force of the book, the love that they had for each other, the love that I had for them as sort of half imaginary friends and half parts of myself, was what carried me through the project for all the years of writing about them and going through into the depths of both of their traumas. Peter's through, his family trauma that he's getting memories of, and Julian through some of the stuff that you heard about of his Christian upbringing that was in Georgia that was very homophobic and very phony and repressive. So it was the love was always there in the distance, I guess a beacon, and I just had to like heal my way through it with the characters.
I think that's something that I really loved about your book is that often I'm in the romance space, and so I'll read a lot of books that are about people unpacking difficult emotions, and often it's seen as a barrier to the relationship. But it's also kind of neat in the way that it's portrayed, like survivors. It meant a lot to me to write a survivor who's going through a mental health crisis and also being kind of an asshole and like hurting her partner, but also they talk about it. And I really appreciated that in your book, shit gets real, and like Peter and Julian really have to love each other through it and talk about it and forgive each other and fuck up again. And it felt very authentic and moving. And I was just like, I'm so glad this exists, because as a survivor, when you're in those relationships, when you're unpacking what happened to you and realizing how bad it was because you're being loved correctly by someone, it's a real head fuck.
Yes.
And I feel like Peter had moments of that with Julian, where it's somebody's really showing up for him and loving him, and it kind of drives home, oh my God, these other people have fucking failed me, and that feels terrible.
Yes. Well, I mean, shout out to my wonderful Adam, my husband, who is home with our son in Massachusetts right now. Because when we fell in love back around the time this book is set, in our 20s, I finally like started to see my own family through a different lens. Like, oh, here's somebody that accepts me for who I am and I feel safe with, and I've never felt this way before. What does that mean, right? Like you said. And Peter is discovering the same thing, and that's why he wants this relationship and doesn't want this relationship. And it's the kind of asshole survivor is based on also friendships that I had when I was processing my own family trauma, and realizing kind of late that like the things that drew me together with these other friends were also ways in which we were reenacting kind of emotional, unhealthy dynamics and hurting each other, and you know, regretting my part in that, and also regretting, like, I had a female friend who was a lot like Ben, and I didn't recognize that that was the kind of relationship that Ben and Charlotte have, because we don't also talk about that in terms of friendships.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that in a non-sexual way. So I put a lot of that stuff into it. And that friend is the person who told me that Peter was a survivor too. So I owe her a lot, even though we're no longer friends. So it is very complicated.
It's weird when people are not black and white villains and they teach you about yourself, they teach you lessons, and they also treat you like shit. And you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. It's very confusing. It's frustrating that it's difficult to identify people as bad or good. It's, yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. If I have anything much left over from my Christian days, a lot of that is that sense of, you know, original sin is a shitty concept in a lot of ways. And when I have a child, realize that, oh, you know, you're not born sinful. You're annoying maybe, but you're not born sinful, you know? But there is something to it, that sense of everyone being really mixed. And the human nature is to be imperfect and to have to forgive each other when we mess up, but also to not forgive each other if we don't take responsibility for it. And that's where I think a lot of survivor books do fall short. You know, I'm gonna get my soapbox here and say, I think a lot of survivor stories are very pat, you know, of, oh, I've reconciled with these people and I forgave them, but like, you gotta do the work.
There's like a neatness to a lot of survivor stories. And I think that's partially because as a survivor, you are drawn to a simple narrative, like you find empowerment in that, and it's a way to heal, but it's also very limiting. And publishers and readers are drawn to that as well, because it's simple. It doesn't ask of you as much as it does to read a book where survivors are jerks or are repeating cycles of violence or whatever it might be. And it's been interesting for me, just not to be like, I'm gonna complain about my Goodreads reviews, but
Oh, please,
but it's interesting putting stories out in the world about survivors that don't fit these boxes of I'm looking for justice and revenge, or I need to be defended because I've had my life ruined. Like some people just want to heal and be okay, and it's not clear what justice would look like with the person who's harmed you. And so really what would be fun is like going to your college reunion and making out with your cute situationship from senior year, and then quitting your terrible job and being on a friend's couch and relying on mutual aid. Like that can be a happily ever after too for survivors. And I love that your book, again, no spoilers, but it's healing is not simple, and healing is also never really over either.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's gonna be a book 3.
That was gonna be my next
I
question.
should have predicted in 2008 when I wrote Two Natures that sounds like the sequel, because Origin Story sounds like the first book that's actually the second. So I think the next book is gonna have to have like an 11 in the title or something, just to confuse people further.
We're clearing chronology.
Yeah. But it's definitely, I don't know what the future holds for Peter and Julie. My current project is something different, but who knows? You know, they're gonna have a lot of work to do, and whether they will reconcile or stay estranged from family members that currently or just now appearing to be problematic, I'm not really sure.
And I like that. I think that's good. I didn't realize this even was a second book until I went on to write my Goodreads review for your book about how much I loved it, and I saw that it was a second story. And first of all, if you haven't read the first one, you can read the second one and you will not be disappointed. You won't feel like you've missed anything, but I think that's a testament to the way that you've written these stories, is that they're moments in these characters' lives, but they feel very human because there is going to be a before and an after, and they're not done learning. And I want a book 3.
Okay, I'll get on it. Well, you'll have to buy enough of books 1 and
Yes.
2 for me to get a book deal for book 3. Thank you. Well, something I loved about your book is how you expand the focus from just the personal. I mean, on one level, it's like a queer Hallmark romance where like the woman leaves her shitty capitalist big city job and, no spoilers, but like has a kind of happy ending with a perfect guy and, but on the other hand, it doesn't whitewash the problems that are more systemic than that. And especially the intersection between being an abuse survivor in a personal context and then being primed for being an abuse survivor in a professional context. Because a really big component of her book, if you haven't read it, is that Charlotte also works for like this tech bro asshole. He is a CEO of the
Yeah.
magazine, kind of like Fast Company, like
Yes.
that kind of.
Yeah, like I imagined like Fast Company or Fortune or Business Insider, like one of those magazines where there's a paywall, which is great because you have a reason to never read it. It's really prestigious, so you're like, oh yeah, Wall Street Journal.
Right, you just carry it around under your arm, but you don't actually read it.
Yes.
But yeah, so her boss is similarly, like always giving her that intermittent reinforcement that never pays out, just like an emotionally abusive parent or a boyfriend.
Mhm.
And I just found that really interesting and true, having worked briefly in a law firm, I can definitely relate to like feeling like you're getting into the same shit, the same way in a different
Yeah.
setting.
Law firms, I am not in the legal profession, but I have friends who are, and holy shit, abusive workplace.
It really
Oh my
is.
God.
And it's not just the person, it's the structure.
Exactly.
That's what I think is so interesting about the book, that it feels very enlightened about the structure of our society and how the multiple vulnerabilities that a person has. When the family's not dependable, then where's your social safety net? Then you get stuck in a corporate job where you're also depending on an abusive person to survive all over again.
Yeah, I really wanted to write about what does a happily ever after look like when the world is fucked?
Yes.
And
What?
and what does it look like to be okay when you're still completely financially insecure and you don't know if you believe in marriage and you don't really know how you're gonna pay your rent next month? Like, what does a happily ever after even look like when all of that is true? And I wanted it to be very, a friend of mine, Lydia, who I was talking to also is a romance writer, and she said that for her, a happily ever after is when you feel like the characters, the main relationship, have learned enough and have learned how to communicate with each other that you get a sense that, okay, they can make this work. It's not necessarily, there's a baby in the epilogue, like. And so I really wanted to make it clear that like Charlotte, by the end of the book, has taken back a lot of her agency, but she's still living in a system of capitalism and homophobia and all these issues. And it's also the Trump presidency at the time of the book. So for her, she's like, yeah, spoiler alert, I quit my terrible job, but like, cool, now what's gonna happen? At least I have this loving person who is also not really perfect either and lives with his mother, but like, what a cat, she's so nice.
It's true.
Yes.
So I mean, I know it's a novel and not an advice column, but I guess what would you say? Because I mean, I did sort of marry out of hell. So I also still feel like my life works, but it's not really generalizable. And that's a kind of a survivor guilt as well. Like,
oh yeah,
feeling that way, that like, what would I say to other people who are, living with an abusive parent and trying to make a living in an abusive workplace? That, oh, you'll fall in love with a guy who's really wealthy. And then leave him home with your kid while you read smut too. It works. So this is why I don't drink. Because I'm sober. So what do we recommend to our fellow strugglers?
I think one thing that would probably be true for us both is that you have to unlearn what you thought success and happily ever after was in the first place. And like, maybe this dream job that I thought I wanted is absolutely hell. And so I want to get a job that offers healthcare that is like maybe selling out, but then after hours, I'm able to volunteer with rescue cats and like that happily ever after. Like, I think that challenging what we've been told that we're supposed to want and figuring that out for ourselves is the first way to get out of a lot of shitty situations, because then you're not constantly thinking, why am I not happy in this horrible situation? And I think for queer people, in some ways, I think queer people are lucky in that a lot of us, especially folks who are older, we didn't think that marriage was ever going to be an option. So we didn't dream of that as our happily ever after. And I went to college. I'm the youth on this panel, but I'm still like, when I was in college, gay marriage still wasn't legal. And like, when I look at kids today, I'm like, oh my God, they're getting pressured to marry their lesbian girlfriend by their parents. Like, I'm so happy for them.
So they've gone from the lesbian, the U-Haul lesbian, to the U-Haul lesbian's mom.
Yes, yeah. But I do, like, when I think about what advice I would give myself, especially when I was in an abusive relationship, it was like, yeah, this person who seems like he would be this amazing husband, like, you don't have to get married. Like, you don't have to want this. And you're allowed to be like, this actually seems shitty. And congratulations to him marrying someone else. And that person is not me. Best of luck. But yeah, I just be honest with yourself about, do I actually want these things, or has society told me to want them? And I'm allowed to figure out what I want my life to look like as I go, no matter how old I am or how much I've done to build a life that doesn't fit me.
That's really good advice. I think I would probably have benefited from that advice when I was younger too, or now for that matter. I mean, I think we still have to redefine what success is. Even now, we still have to figure out what it is to be satisfied and to value the relationships that we have and the things that we've made, whether or not they make money.
Well said.
Yes. That being said, you
Buy
should
our
buy our
books.
So do you have any more cues, or should I open it to the audience, or anything else I wanted? Actually, there was one thing I wanted to ask about that was we were talking about humor.
Mhm.
That was sort of the premise of this as well.
Yes,
and I loved the absurdity of the insight that they get that Charlotte gets into these people, that like she's so afraid of Ben, rightly so, because he's a stalker and he's well connected and the university doesn't care.
Yeah.
And she's afraid of her boss because he's her boss. But then she comes to realize what idiots they are.
Yeah.
Like they're just such douche bros. They're so basically douche bros. They're, like,
Yeah.
they're not even different from other douche bros.
Yeah.
So they think they're really special, but they're really not. And that helps her find courage. So I just want to hear your thoughts about humor as a kind of an empowerment and dealing with these kinds of issues.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a story, brief story. I used to work for TED Talks, the TED Talks, and I went to the conferences where they recorded the TED Talks, and I got to meet a lot of incredibly powerful, famous people, and they're freaks just like us. TED never had me sign an NDA, which was their mistake. As an example, like my first conference, I was 22. I had just been promoted from intern to like assistant person. I got in an elevator and Jeff Bezos gets in the elevator with his brother. They don't acknowledge my existence. And they start talking shit about another executive who's at the conference. And like, I'm not going to name his name because then I'm like, oh, somebody might sue me. But it was just this weird moment of like, they're all weird and insecure and gossipy and like they're making fun of someone for being short. And I'm like, you're both short too. It was this moment of like, everyone's a loser. This is all like, you can be one of the richest people in the world and still be like, well, this person is getting more attention than me and I'm going to talk shit with my brother in the elevator. And then the next day I went to the food court at McDonald's because I was like, I can't eat any more of this conference food and I want a minute alone. And Steven Spielberg was eating a fucking McMuffin in the food court. And I was just like, everything, this is all an illusion. And this, yeah, so the absurdity of seeing these incredibly powerful people in these very human, goofy sitcom moments, it was just, I'm glad I learned that lesson very young of like, everyone is ridiculous and no one is being intimidated, and intimidating is very much a state of mind. And like, don't let anyone make you feel small because they feel small themselves. As much as money is a real thing. Yeah.
Very, very good.
Also, please don't sue me. But yeah.
That's a great story and a great answer.
Thank you.
Shall we take
Questions?
questions, comments, proposals?
Don't be shy.
You won't have enough of us already.
I don't have a specific question, but.
Hi, friend who works at TED.
I also haven't been to a conference myself, but I do feel strongly about everything she shared about. Updates me. But, so my question isn't about, I mean, I don't specifically have a specific question, but I love the side characters in your book, like Charlotte's friends and how they have their own conflict and growth. And I was just wondering if you could speak more to how you crafted them, like outside the main narrative.
Yeah, I think this is true for both of our books. I was very aware when writing the book that I am a white girl from Connecticut and Charlotte has this wonderful diverse group of friends. And it meant a lot to me that none of them are there to serve her emotional growth. They do help out because they are friends and they've known her for a long time, but they're all having their own adventures. And I sometimes fantasize about like, I don't know that I'd ever write like a sequel, but I have my own like headcanon of what they were all getting up to during the reunion when Charlotte was having like her own dumb spiral over boys. And like her ex-girlfriend and her best friend have their own like lesbian love affair going on. And for me, it was just, that was where a lot of the humor came in, was, okay, Charlotte's going through it, but like these other people are having an absolute blast at their college reunion. And some of them are going to an a cappella party and dealing with the drama that happens there. And like, it's these little glimpses of these are all compelling, weird, interesting people too. Charlotte's very lucky to know them, and hopefully she will ask them about their lives when she is in a better mental place. But what about you? You have so many amazing supporting characters as well.
I mean, some of them are characters like Cheryl, who showed up in the previous book. And I do a lot of tarot cards for my novel plotting, and sometimes characters that I need to fill a hole in the plot will just sort of be suggested by a spread. So that's sometimes how they come into my life. And sometimes I just want to comment on a type of person or a certain type of situation. And, and that's where often I can bring in something funny. Like there's a scene where Peter and Julian are going to a comic book convention because Peter is writing a comic book with Tyler, one of the kids that was mentioned in the scene, who is at the transitional home. Is an artist, and Peter's a comic book fan. He's writing comic books. They go to a comic book convention, and so you can find all kinds of quirky characters there, and find something that will serve Peter's journey as someone who's trying to put himself in the spotlight, not just help other people, assert himself, and be a little bit of an asshole also, and also just like make fun of, of artists, like. We're not really making fun of comic book people, I'm making fun of writers,
Yeah.
And how we're all like trying to sell our stuff and, trying to.
That's really trying to break even.
Yes, trying to break
going
even,
to this convention.
Trying to get out of our little introvert shells to actually be with other people and realize how weird they are, So that's often how supporting characters come to me, is through the kinds of milieu where I want a scene to be set, and then like what kinds of people would populate that, and how funny could it be to have Julian and Peter interact with them or possibly have sex with them.
I love that. That was like a little side quest. That really,
Yes.
I enjoyed.
They have many side quests.
Yeah.
Side pieces.
Yeah, there you go. I really loved Tyler. I loved their I say there because I feel like there's a gender journey happening there. I love their story running parallel and how they're almost a foil to Peter. Yeah, Ty was one of my favorites as a side character.
Yes, Ty, thank you. I'm so happy you felt that way. Ty is a gender fluid. I think there wouldn't be words for it back in
Yeah.
1996. We might consider Tyler a trans femme now or a gender fluid person, assigned male. And so that's part of the struggle that Peter and Tyler are going through is how Ty's work is also part of a self-discovery journey that they have to go through against the odds of the social workers, including Peter's mom, who feel like, oh, this is just a trauma reaction. So that's where sort of the intersection between trauma and queerness also got into the book, and the pathologizing of queerness, even by people who think that they're allies,
Yeah.
when what you're doing is that kink, is it transition, is it poly, is it just not being a respectable gay, and you're traumatized, because who the hell isn't traumatized? Then it becomes a way to invalidate that identity. So it was really important to me to make sure that I got Ty right as a character, and I used a sensitivity reader to, to get the racial and gender issues hopefully effectively portrayed with that as well, and that was really helpful.
Yeah,
So shout out to sensitivity reader.
absolutely. To go back to where we started, I feel like if Ty were a teenager today, Ty would be so good on TikTok.
Yes,
Like,
you would.
Like weird, like makeup tutorials and like weird abstract, like comic art and like, yeah, Ty would have so many vocabulary words now.
Born
And
too
that-
soon.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yes.
I'm glad that the Ties of today can go on TikTok and be like, oh, the hashtag gender fluidity is a whole thing that I can look up at 14
That's right.
in a way that wasn't available before.
It's true. That's why queer history is so important in intergenerational conversations. Any other thoughts? You're just stunned by our greatness. Thank you all so much for coming out and supporting us and being this beautiful community, writing this book and all my books. Really, some of the best part of that is just being part of this community. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you to the Bureau for hosting us. Everyone buy stuff. I recommend the cats.
Thank you both.